What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo-yo.
So, Bud Crawford made history last night, first man to ever become undisputed in 2 boxing weight classes. Now, I predicted that he was going to beat ERROL Spence. What I was not expecting was a multiple knockdown domination, which is exactly what we got last night. In your opinion right now, was Bud Crawford the pound-for-pound king in boxing?
He has to be considered the pound-for-pound GOAT right now. I mean, what he did against ERROL Spence Jr. was nothing short of spectacular. ERROL Spence is one of the best fighters that we've got on the planet right now, and he looked like he did not belong in there with Terence Crawford. I was expecting Terence to win just because he's so difficult to beat. He's got so many different weapons, his footwork, he can switch stances, everything he does really well. But ERROL Spence is so hard to beat. He's so hard to slow down with that jab. And when you talk about somebody who's able to win fights via just taking round after round after round, you have to put ERROL Spence in there at the top of the list. But man, Bud Crawford looked like a different animal operating on a different frequency last night.
He did, and I think Bud Crawford is probably the best finisher in the game. When he smells blood in the water, when he gets you hurt, it's pretty much all said and done from there. I think that the Spence corner was considering throwing in the towel prior to the referee stopping the fight. But one thing that Bud has a real flair for is the dramatics when he's about to win a fight. When he can tell that his opponent's hurt, when he can see that their energy's zapped, when they don't have a lot of fight left in them, that's when he really puts his foot on the gas, and that's when he starts to make it look violent, look bloody, look like, you know what, this guy needs to be stopped right now before the other opponent gets hurt. And so I think that in a lot of ways, he's probably the best finisher in the game.
I have to agree. And he even said that in the post-fight interview. I mean, he's such a sharp technical boxer. And not to say that when we talk about the theater of finishing a fight, it's not a faking of techniques or it's not like making it look worse than it actually is. But what he's doing, everything from the punches that he throws, the really close-in hooks that seem like he's too close in to even score, and then the big shots that he throws when he knows that his opponent is not going to throw anything back at him, that sort of stuff really makes the referee get on his tippy toes and start to watch with serious caution. When Terence Crawford smells blood in the water, like you're talking about, he's able to do things not only with the punching, but with the body language. Like he'll shuck somebody off with his shoulder and just move them right into another punch, and then he kind of will push them around into the ropes, and it kind of looks like they're just like falling all over the place, almost like they're stumbling. And that makes the referee really get on high alert. And when you talk about finishing in boxing, you can't help but put Terence Bud Crawford at the top of the list. When I saw this fight get announced, I had a feeling Bud Crawford was going to be able to win. It wasn't going to be easy, but I thought because of the skill of both of the fighters, we're going to see 12 rounds. We're going to see probably a split decision scorecard because both of them are so good and their skills are probably comparable. I wasn't expecting multiple hits to the canvas for ERROL Spence Jr. I wasn't expecting him to look like he was getting ragdolled from start to finish. And that just goes to show you how much better Bud Crawford is than everybody else in the sport.
Yeah, no doubt. And I would be remiss if we didn't mention Terence Crawford's wrestling background. You know, we're mostly an MMA channel.
Right.
That's what we talk about largely on this show. Obviously, if there's a big boxing match, we cover that as well. But a lot of people don't know Terence Crawford does have a background in wrestling, and that makes him very strong and tenacious. That's what wrestlers are known for. They can bully you in there. They can shuck you off. And there was a real strength differential last night, and it was apparent. ERROL was kind of getting pushed around. He was getting walked down, and I think a lot of that has to do with just the pure strength, tenacity, and grit that comes with being a wrestler as well as a boxer. And you see athletes that have training in certain sports. It's not the sport that they do to make a living, but it's something that certainly adds to that. And I think his grappling background does play a factor in how good he actually is in the ring.
Yeah, I agree. And we see MMA fighters go over to boxing all the time, and they never get their hand raised. And every now and again, you'll see somebody go, well, why don't we see a boxer come over to MMA? We'd like to see it. Most of them wouldn't be able to last a single round in an MMA fight. But when the question comes up of what boxers would go over to MMA and actually do well, I think Bud Crawford would probably do better than just about anybody. The wrestling background, the way he's able to fight at his range, and clearly he's got tons of power in his hands. I'd love to see it happen. I'm sure it won't ever happen, mostly because of the paydays. You know, Bud Crawford and ERROL Spence Jr. just got a lot of money for this last fight, as well as many of the other main event boxers are getting these days. But if it were to ever happen, I think Bud Crawford would be a great representative for boxing to come over to MMA.
Yeah, and I don't think he's going to be coming over to MMA anytime soon
Me either.
But what he is going to do now is be fighting big names from here until he retires, because ERROL Spence was the biggest name by far that he's fought so far. His star power rose substantially last night, especially after that finish.
Agreed.
And I think the best potential opponents for him are the really skilled fighters that lurk kind of just one weight class below where he is. You know, I think the 140 fighters, obviously Tank Davis's name has been thrown around there. You have Teofimo Lopez. You have fighters like that that could draw a big name on the other side against Bud Crawford that also have really amazing finishing power. So I think for his next fight, we'll see somebody come up to 147 now that he's got all of those belts and try to take the undisputed status from him in a weight class one below where they currently sit.
Yeah, I could see that happening, and I think it'd be a great move for some of those guys down at 135 and 140 to make the jump up. But moving 7 pounds in weight is a lot different than moving 5 pounds. You know, you see the guys at 130 bump up to 35. It's not really that big of an issue. There's not really a huge size difference. But I tend to think that if you got one of these guys that was fighting at 135 and then maybe he's done a couple fights at 140, try to jump up to 147, he could be seriously undersized and have a serious power disadvantage against Bud Crawford. And I don't think that he would bring enough speed to slow down Bud Crawford or make it seem like there's that big of a difference. And that is kind of where I run into an issue with Terence. So he's such a good fighter. He's the best on the planet right now. And there's so many big names right in there between 130 and 140. But I doubt most of them would take the bait on fighting Bud Crawford unless it's for a really big payday and they're willing to go in there and basically lose. And then when you look at the weight classes above him, he could dare to be great and go up to those. But there's also not a ton of huge names in those divisions until you get up to about 168 where Canelo is. And I don't think he wants to jump up, 20-some pounds just to fight Canelo. And while I think it would be a very fun fight, skill-wise, I think he might be too undersized to fight somebody like Canelo. So I hope Terence Crawford gets as many big fights as he can possibly get before he decides to call it a career. It looked like he was operating on a whole different level last night, and I just hope big names can come up and give him some good competitive fights because we're looking at a GOAT.
Let's hope so.